Today is the day we're going to be driving the HD AT4X and Super Duty trimmer. I've already done a comparison with the ZR2 and this Lariat trimmer, so I want to drive the trucks today because that's going to be a better overall test, because this really compares with a platinum trimmer, and yeah, this truck would definitely win, I think, overall in terms of the options and features that it has. So let's go ahead and drive the Ford first, and then we'll drive the AT4X right afterwards. Guys, ready? It's been a while since I've driven a Ford truck, so this is actually gonna be a good test for me too, just to kind of get an idea. Now, I haven't really done any driving impressions yet with my AT4X, so this is gonna kind of be one of the first ones, and I'm happy I get to do this test because when I do the separate video, I'll be able to speak to it a little bit better. This truck does have the tilt headrest, something that you can't get in the AT4X. And I can definitely tell that this truck sits differently from the other Ford trucks, because I did drive one today actually. I just drove around a lot, and I wanted to jump in one of these just to kind of get a quick comparison, and you can tell this one sits slightly higher. But in terms of fuel economy, that's going to be the real kicker for most people, because more aggressive tire, that extra lifts, you get a different valance on the front, which is going to reduce fuel economy. But let's go ahead and talk about the power stroke that we have in this truck, and then I'll go ahead and set up for the 0 to 60. Here is the beast of all beasts, high output power stroke. You cannot get the standard output with the trimmer, but that's okay, because you ready for this? 500 horsepower, 1,200 pound-feet of torque, made it to a 10-speed transmission known as the 10R140. Lower compression compared to the standard output. Let's see how this one does with 0 to 60. Here we go. I do think having these more aggressive tires, you take a small hit on acceleration from 0, because I've done a few tests with the trimmer, and I want to say that they all kind of ended up in that 8-second range. Now the truck is warm. I did allow that to warm up this morning, so yeah. I love the overall power delivery with the 10-speed transmission. Like, there's a little bit of a lag at first, but once the truck gets going, it's just brute force. And the other aspect of this truck is there's some torque management built in there, and probably because the truck only has a few miles on it, has like 30 miles on it, so it's definitely probably more powerful off the line when it gets a little bit more miles on it. But for the most part, this truck really performs well, and yeah, I'm really excited to see how it does with the performance and the fuel economy compared to the GMC. By now you know that this truck does have a 355 rear with the locker, and at about 70 miles an hour we're just over 1500 RPMs. We can probably call that 1600 RPMs, and if we were to get up to 75, notice how it's not downshifting into 10th gear, and I probably only had it down like 20%, but still, that's pretty dang good. We're probably around 17, maybe 1700 RPM. So this truck definitely does run at pretty decent RPMs. You can get a 331 if you don't want the trimmer package. And I can pretty much tell, I mean, these trucks do ride a little bit rougher compared to the regular Ford Super Duties. Here's the tire pressure, about 60 PSI in that ballpark. And we're gonna be to the half point here in a little bit, but let's go ahead and talk about how loud the truck is. I think I got close to 19 MPG with a regular Ford Super Duty, so tires can really affect the fuel economy. So that's just something to consider here. 67 right here, it was 66 right there. 65 out back. So 66, 67, 65. Remember those numbers when I do the GMC. So here's exit 11. We're gonna hop off here. And here's where we are so far, 16.6. Driven about 6 miles, so we'll probably get about 15 miles out of this trip here. And so far, I mean, I gotta admit to you guys, having an off-road HD or Super Duty, you can't really tell a huge difference, or at least I can't with the tires. Now, if you were to air these up to max PSI, you probably could really tell that the truck rides a lot rougher. But yeah, we're at 17.6, and man, like the fuel economy is doing really well. I know someone's gonna say in the comment section, you know, your fuel economy runs are not actual numbers and you need to do it by the pump. Anytime you're doing tests like this, like I'm not doing a lot of stop and go, I'm not, you know, turning the truck off, turning it back on. I'm literally just doing a quick loop. These trip monitors have gotten so much better, and I find that they're pretty accurate. Actually, sometimes the pump will say that it's higher compared to this in some cases, and I've proved that many times in a lot of my videos. So yeah, we're at 17.8. Let's go ahead and head back to the dealership, and then we'll jump into GMC. So here's where the Ford trim is gonna win in terms of the payload. Now, as far as the gross axle weight rating, it's 5,200 pounds. The rear is 6,240 with an 11,000 pound gross vehicle weight rating. All in, here is the payload at 3,138 pounds. And this truck does have 18 by 8 inch wheels. This is where I think GM is lacking the most. I love the fact that Ford gives you this page. This is called the general measurements. You can see the engine, coolant, transmission, engine oil, temperatures, all in one spot. They don't just stop there. They keep going. You see this? They also have diesel measurements, so you can see turbo boost, engine braking, all that good stuff. You can't see any of this stuff for the GM. Like, I like to monitor my DPF because depending on my routes that I drive, I will kind of watch that to see if the route that I'm taking is efficient enough to keep that DPF nice and cleaned out, which is the exhaust filter. But like I said, we'll be back at the dealership in about a few minutes, and then we'll hop into that AT4X. Pulling in right now, and we'll just go ahead and stop next to these, are these transit vans? Is that what they call those? I can't remember sometimes, but yeah, here we go. 18 and a half, 14.9 miles driven, and about 16 minutes is saying, a little bit less than 17 minutes. So let's go ahead and drive the AT4X. One thing I didn't really mention was the tires. I cannot wait to kind of get a good comparison with my AT4X, because dirt tracks are known to being louder, but we'll see if that's the case against the ones on my AT4X. Here is the Gen 2 L5P. This engine has a bump in horsepower and torque for 2024, 470 horsepower, 975 pound-feet of torque. Still made it to the 10-speed transmission, 342 rear end. Let's see how it does for the acceleration. Here we go. Wow. There's gonna be some very upset people in the comment section. I don't do anything special with the launches, guys. I don't brake boost. I don't turn on automatic four-wheel drive. I don't do any of that stuff. All I do is smash the gas pedal because I don't want there to be any excuses. And this truck did 3.36 seconds to 30 in 7.9. Now, I cannot remember what the Ford did, but I don't think it did that well. I don't think so. Yeah, the Ford was just behind at 8.06 seconds to 60. Now again, this truck has less horsepower and torque. I think GM's lying about their performance numbers. I need to get this truck dynoed. because I'm willing to bet you this truck is putting out more horsepower than they say. I think it might be closer to 500 horsepower too, because I even heard the tires slip. And the power delivery with the Duramax, it's just unmatched. I mean, it's just clean power. Like, there's like no burst of power like you feel like in the Fords, and sometimes even in the Cummins. You feel a big burst of power. But with this engine, it's such great performance. Let's go ahead and look at the RPMs on this truck. So you guys can pretty much see we're probably about 1500 RPMs at 75. Now this truck has the 342 rear, so it is a higher gear, and you can kind of see that with the RPM. So I would venture to say, you know, these trucks, they're about the same in terms of the RPMs, and so with this having higher gearing, you could potentially get a little bit better fuel economy. One thing that I can clearly tell with the Territory MTs compared to the Duratrax is these have like a light hum to them. It's not bad. Like, it's kind of what you would expect, but I can tell that the Duratrax are a little bit quieter compared to these. Now, you have to keep in mind, these tires are wider compared to the ones that's on the Ford, so that could be another downfall for the size of these tires. I mean, this is a 34.8 inch tire, 12 inches wide. That Ford is 34.8 inches tall as well, but it's like 11.2 inches wide. So having a wider tire could turn into more noise. And with that being said, let's go ahead and check it out. So about 67. $69, and about 65 out back. So it's a little bit louder up front, and you can tell that these tires have a little bit more noise, but they look so much nicer on this truck. I prefer a wider tire on a big truck like this. I mean, they go well in hand, but we're about to be to the midpoint here in a second. I'll show you guys where we are. I reset trip one. Right now we're at 15.9, so I think we might be a little bit behind the Ford actually, so I might have spoke just in about that 342 rear. This might be the closest test I've ever done. We're at exit 11, and we're at 17.8, 17.9. Oh, oh yeah, I'm coasting now, so it's just going up right now. Wow, we are definitely really close. Now, I'm not gonna be able to go through the light like I did with the Ford, so yeah, this truck is definitely a little bit better on fuel economy, just a little bit. But you know what? Even though this has more traffic, you know, this should be the real test right here to see how it ends, because going back the opposite direction, I have to get back up to 75 miles an hour, so that's gonna affect it a little bit. But the other thing is, there's a lot of traffic here, guys, so we'll see how it all shakes out. Here are some of the ratings on the door. Your gross axle up front is going to be rated at 5,600 pounds. This truck does have class-leading rear at 6,600 pounds. 11,350 is the gross fuel weight rating. 18/9 wheels, and here is the payload for this truck. The AT4X has definitely a better shock suspension compared to the Fords, and I can't really tell that this truck rides better on the highway. Like, they both have a stiffer suspension. Now that Ford had overload leaf springs, this one does not. But I think with the lift on this truck, because they do lift the rear on the GMCs, they don't on the Fords. They only lift the front end of the Fords. This truck does feel like it has a little bit stiffer ride. So even with these Multimatic DSSV shocks, they don't really have that softer ride that I was expecting this truck to have. I'm just being honest here. It's just fact. But it's not a bad ride to where I would think this is unbearable. And I think most people will probably find this truck to ride stiffer than what they would expect. Like, if you're thinking about trading your half ton in on this and you care about the ride a lot, don't do it. You're gonna be really upset with the ride of this truck. And you know, the seats in this AT4X, they're a little bit softer in comparison with the regular Chevy and GMC seats. But the Ford has better seats 100%. If you want a softer seat, go ahead and get the Ford. That Ford's a better buy for you. I find these seats to be comfortable. I mean, these do have the massagers, but for the most part, I was expecting the DSSV to be a little bit more softer on the highway, but I don't think that's the case. I'm just being honest. It's just not as soft as I was expecting it to be. But we'll be back at the dealership here in about 5 minutes, and then we'll see where we ended off at. You guys aren't gonna believe this. You're not gonna believe this. Oh wow. Oh, it went up by, it literally just went up like by 0.1. Wow. So 15.2, 18.6 miles per gallon. Insane. So that was probably the closest I've ever seen any of my tests. I did have a lot more fuel in my AT4X because I filled it up like a few days ago. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter because on the highway, the weight doesn't mean much to these big HD pickups. But I was expecting the Ford to really beat the GMC for all the performance. And I was kind of expecting it to beat it on the MPG because I've only really driven this truck mixed driving in the highway, city, stop and go, things like that. So I haven't really got like a nice highway run in this truck. So the Philly Commie was almost a little bit better than my gas truck that I traded in, but I'm really pleased with this truck. I mean, I think they're lying about the horsepower and torque, guys. This truck has more power than they're letting off because it should not have beat the Ford the way it did. Now, it wasn't by much, but all the way up to 60 miles an hour, that GMC was ahead of that Ford. And I did the testing the exact same. No excuses here. I'm not trying to, like, you know, put the Ford down, but with 500 horsepower, 1,200 pound-feet of torque, I would have expected to at least catch it by 60 miles an hour. But thank you so much for watching the video. I hope it was helpful. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and check out Larry H. Miller Super Ford's inventory. Ken was the guy that helped me at the dealership, so if you would like to purchase a vehicle, you can reach out to Ken in the commercial department. See you guys soon.